Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled Kaelen and the Wild Brother, an epic tale of friendship, fate, and legacy. In the heart of an endless golden plain, nestled between rivers that shimmered like molten silver, there stood the magnificent city of Narrated. Its towers pierced the sky like stone spears, and its walls, vast and ancient, bore carvings of victories past, beasts slain, cities conquered, and empires bowed. Merchants from distant lands traded spices and scrolls in its markets. Scholars recited verses under archways of marble. The gods themselves were said to walk unseen along its broad streets. Narrated was a marvel of the age, and it had one master, King Kaelen. Kaelen was unlike any ruler before him. Tall as a cedar of the east, his presence commanded silence. His voice, when raised, stirred crowds like storm winds. He was said to be 2/3 divine and 1/3 man, a son of heaven and earth. His strength was unmatched, and his mind was sharp, if not always kind. To the people of Narrated, Kaelen was both guardian and tyrant. He built temples that kissed the clouds, but he also demanded the labor of thousands. He led armies with divine fury, but his warriors whispered of his restlessness, his sudden rages, his dreams that left him walking alone in the courtyard under moonlight. Kaelen could not sleep. Each night, while the city slumbered beneath a quilt of stars, Kaelen walked the great terrace above the palace gates. From there, he saw the lanterns flicker in the homes below, the distant fires of shepherds on the hills. Yet none of it brought him peace. Within him was a hollow vast as the deserts beyond Narrated. It was not fear. It was not ambition. It was something deeper, a calling he could not name. One night, Kaelen summoned the courtiers and dream readers. "I have seen him again," Kaelen said, his hands clenched behind his back. "In the dream. A man. Not of this world, yet not a god either. He stood in the wilderness, among beasts, his hair tangled with vines. He did not bow. He did not speak. Yet I knew him. And he knew me." The eldest seer, a woman whose eyes were clouded with age but sharp with wisdom, bowed low. "The dream is true, my king. The one you saw is your mirror, the one born to balance your path. Where you are forged of fire, he is formed of earth. Where your voice commands, his silence humbles." Kaelen's brow furrowed. "A rival. A companion," she corrected. "Or perhaps a reckoning." That night, Kaelen returned to the terrace and looked toward the wilderness that framed the edge of the kingdom. He imagined a man in his dream, the feral figure with eyes that bore no fear. Something stirred in him, something older than pride or hunger for war. Far beyond the city, in a forest where men dared not linger, a creature of legend walked among wolves. His name was Rin. Rin had never known walls. He had never spoken a word. Born of the deep soil and the breath of forgotten gods, Rin ran with the herds, drank from glacial streams, and slept beneath the limbs of ancient trees. The animals did not flee from him, they circled him, trusted him. The lions bowed their heads as he passed. The stags knelt. Birds nested in his tangled hair. He was the spirit of the wild made flesh. Yet even Rin had begun to dream. He saw fire cities with walls of stone, people with voices like thunder and eyes full of longing. He saw a man on a throne, restless, burning, reaching toward the stars. He did not understand why he was being called. But the pull was undeniable. Back in Varath, the people spoke of Kaelen's unease. The priests whispered prayers. The builders worked faster, adding towers to the skyline as if more stone could silence the gods. One day, a strange event shook the city. At the edge of Varath's grain fields, a shepherd boy came running. His voice cracked with panic. Something walks the meadows. It drives off the lions it drinks beside them. A man, but not a man. His skin is like bark, his eyes like stormlight. Kaelen ordered a council. He listened to the account, expression unreadable. He has come, the king whispered to himself. But rather than prepare for war, Kaelen did something no one expected. He ordered the temple of Saralit to send one of their priestesses, Saran, wise in the ways of both gods and men, to go to the wilds, to speak with the creature if he could be spoken to bring him knowledge, and perhaps awaken something more. Saran left with a pack of dried fruits, woven robes, and a stringed harp. She had seen many wonders in her time, but none like the being she encountered under the canopy of the whispering forest. Rin stood unmoving as she approached, the wind brushing through the leaves like hushed chants. Saran did not speak. She played her harp, a melody of dawn and river and longing. The wolves listened. So did Rin. For the first time in his life, he did not run. And so began the slow unraveling of the wild. Back in Varath, Kaelen dreamed once more. But now, the man in the dream stepped closer. They were no longer strangers. The sky above the forest of Maru swayed with slow-moving clouds as dusk folded into night. The wild creatures retreated to their dens, save for one. Rin sat at the edge of a brook, his reflection rippling across the water. Something stirred in him, a strange ache behind his ribs, a weight in his thoughts. The music of Saran's harp haunted him, not as a threat but as an invitation. 4 days after their first meeting, Saran returned to the forest. She did not speak at first. She only played soft hymns, ballads of the city, songs of longing. She weaved stories through melody, and with each one, Rin lingered longer. When at last he spoke, it was not in words, but in imitation. He mimicked the rise and fall of her tones. He echoed the hum of the harp with his voice deep, raw, uncertain. And Saran smiled. "You are not a beast," she whispered. "You are a man forgotten by the world." She taught him to sit still, to eat cooked food, to drink from a cup instead of from his palms. He learned the words for fire, sky, rain. He stumbled over their shapes, but with each syllable, the wilderness inside him trembled. In his dreams, the city came closer. He saw its gates now, its people in masks of gold. And the figure on the throne, Kaelen, no longer looked down from above but stood beside him, cloaked in shadow and starlight. One evening, Saran handed Rin a mirror. "Look," she said. He did. And for the first time, he saw not a wildling but a man. Weathered, yes. Ferocious, yes. But there was thought behind the eyes. A mind awakening. "I do not belong here anymore," Rin said, voice like gravel. "No," Saran agreed, sadness in her tone. "But you may belong somewhere else." Meanwhile, within the towering walls of Barath, Kaelen was not idle. Word of the wild man had spread. The people feared him, called him a demon, a god, or both. Some wanted him destroyed before he reached the city. But Kaelen felt differently. He sensed fate, old and inescapable, turning its wheel. He ordered the gates of the city watched night and day. He spoke with the priesthood, the generals, the dream readers. But he told no one of what he saw in sleep, how he and the wild man stood on opposite shores, reaching for the same flame. "This is not an enemy," Kaelen told his most trusted advisor. "This is my equal. And perhaps the only one who will ever understand me." The advisor looked at him strangely. "Do you fear him?" Kaelen's eyes narrowed. "No. I fear who I might become without him." Saran led Rin to the edge of the fields one morning. In the distance, Barath rose like a storm frozen in stone. Its walls shimmered in the sun. Smoke from 1,000 hearths twisted into the sky. "They will not accept me," Rin said. "Not yet," Saran replied. "But they will know you." She gave him a robe of dark blue, a token of peace. Then, she returned alone to the city, leaving him to choose his path. Rin did not follow immediately. He watched the city for 2 nights from afar. He saw its lights, heard its distant music. And on the 3rd day, he walked forward. The guards spotted him before he reached the main gate. Alarms rang. Arrows were drawn. But the man did not run. He stood tall, clothed in the blue of the temple, his gaze calm, unyielding. Kaelen descended from the palace at the news. When the 2 men finally stood before each other, the city held its breath. Rin looked upon the king not with awe, but recognition. Kaelen stepped down from the dais, his crown casting reflections in the sunlight. They circled one another like wolves. Kaelen raised a hand. Rin caught it. In a flash, they were locked shoulders, arms, strength against strength. The ground trembled. Birds scattered from rooftops. Neither man yielded. It was not a battle for domination, it was a trial of mirrors, each seeking the truth of the other. Then, as if struck by the same thought, they released. Kaelen laughed. "You are not my enemy." "No," Rin said, breathless. "But I am your reckoning." The people stared in silence. But Kaelen turned to them, lifted Rin's hand into the air. "This is Rin," he declared. "Brother of no blood, but of fate. From this day, he stands beside me." And so it began. Not as rivals, nor as strangers, but as two halves of a future unwritten. The city of Narrated, once ruled by one, now beheld two towering figures moving through its streets like twin constellations cast down into mortal flesh. Kaelen and Rin, so different in origin, were bound by a force neither could name, a gravity born not of blood, but of something older, prophecy, perhaps, or the whim of gods. In the weeks following Rin's arrival, Varith pulsed with an unfamiliar energy. The people, wary at first, watched as the once wild man walked beside their king, quiet and observant, never boasting, never demanding. Children trailed behind him in the market, mimicking his stride. The city's beasts, strangely, approached him with trust. Some whispered that the spirits of the wild had sent him to guide the king. Others believed he was sent to tame him. Kaelen, for the first time in years, no longer walked the terrace alone at night. Together, the two men spoke little, but what passed between them in glances and silence spoke louder than words. They sparred in the courtyard, steel against instinct. They sat in the ancient chambers, studying maps and stories carved in stone. Rin taught Kaelen stillness. Kaelen taught Rin fire. Yet, peace never lingers long in the stories of kings. One night, as the city slept, Kaelen awoke breathless, his skin damp with sweat. The dream had returned, only sharper, clearer. He stood before a dark forest, its trees unnaturally tall, their branches like fingers scratching at the sky. Shadows moved within. And from the forest, a voice not human, not beast called his name. He sat up in bed, trembling. By morning, the seers had been summoned. "This is the forest of dusk," the eldest among them said. "Long has it been sealed. Beyond its veil dwells Halrith, the guardian of ages. Some call him a demon, others a god. He has watched over the secrets of the old world for 1,000 years." Kaelen's jaw tightened. "And why do I see him now?" "Because fate is restless," the seer whispered. "And you, my king, have grown still for too long." Kaelen turned to Rin that same day. I cannot ignore it. There is something calling us beyond those woods. Ren did not hesitate. Then we go. The court protested. The priests warned of omens. The generals offered replacements, warriors eager for glory. But Kaelen would not be swayed. He stood before the people of Barath, dressed not in royal robes but in the dark leathers of travel. Ren stood beside him, silent and calm. My ancestors built this city with hands of stone and steel, Kaelen said. But the world beyond these walls is older than we know. If we are to lead Barath into the future, we must first walk through the past. Into shadow. Into legend. And so they left. Their journey began at the edge of the silver plains, where wildflowers bowed beneath the wind and ancient stones whispered forgotten songs. Kaelen, though born in the city, moved with a surprising grace across the land. Ren, returning to the wild, seemed both at home and distant, no longer fully beast, not yet wholly man. On the third night, they made camp beneath a cliff crowned with twisted trees. As the fire crackled, Ren turned to Kaelen. "Why now?" he asked. "Why this path?" Kaelen looked into the flames. "Because I fear becoming a king remembered only in statues. I want to leave behind more than walls." "You already have," Ren said. "You brought me here." Kaelen smiled faintly. "Then let's see what we can build from ruin." They crossed rivers that bled gold at sunrise. Fought off shadow hounds that crawled from forgotten pits. Passed through villages that bowed before them, offering fruit, shelter, and stories of a forest that devours the minds of men. Finally, after 2 weeks of relentless travel, they stood at the border of the forest of dusk. It loomed before them, a wall of living black. No bird sang within. No wind stirred its leaves. Kaelen reached for his blade. Ren touched his wrist. "Not yet. This is not a forest of war. It is a forest of memory." Together, they stepped inside. The darkness swallowed them whole. And so begins a new journey, one not of conquest, but of discovery. Of the self. Of the ancient. Of the things that wait when men forget the old names. The forest of dusk was not a place marked on any map. It was not named in the archives of Barath, nor spoken of in the tales told by firelight. Even the oldest scrolls in the temple vaults referred to it only in metaphors: the sleeping veil, the womb of shadows, the green maw. But Kaelen and Ren did not enter it for the sake of maps or names. They stepped forward because something old had called, and neither king nor beast could ignore it. The instant they crossed its threshold, the air changed. The wind stilled. The scent of moss and forgotten rain clung to their skin. The trees stood in unnatural silence, their branches arched like the backs of watching beasts. Light, even at midday, was choked by the canopy above, filtering down in dim strands like the last breath of a dying star. "We are not welcome here," Kaelen murmured, hand near his blade. "We are not unwelcome either," Rin replied, eyes narrowing. "This forest does not speak in absolutes. It listens." And indeed, it did. Their first hours were slow. They moved not in a straight path but a spiral led not by trail, but by instinct. Every direction looked the same, yet none were safe. Rin marked trees as they passed, but often, when they turned back, the marks were gone. The forest shifted. More than once, Kaelen thought he heard whispers. Not from Rin, nor from the wind but from the trees themselves. They spoke not in words, but in feelings, old grief, laughter long silenced, the ache of waiting. That night, they found a clearing. The moonlight did not reach them. They built a fire, though it felt wrong somehow, like introducing a stranger to a funeral. As Kaelen fed kindling into the flames, Rin stood at the edge of the clearing, staring into the dark. "I know this place," Rin said softly. "Not with memory. With marrow." Kaelen looked up. "You were born of the wild. Perhaps your roots reach farther than you think." "No," Rin said. "This is older than the wild." They were not alone. By the third day, signs appeared too clear to be chance. A ring of stones, blackened as if by ancient fire. A broken totem, etched with symbols that neither man could read. A trail of bones, arranged deliberately in spirals. Then came the dreams. Kaelen saw himself as a child, not in the palace of Vareth but in a hut, cradled by a woman with no face. Rin dreamt of drowning in green, the roots of the trees wrapping around his limbs, not to kill, but to hold. Each morning, they said nothing of what they saw. But the forest knew. On the fifth day, they encountered their first guardian. It did not announce itself. It emerged. From the trunk of a tree wider than any tower in Vareth, a figure peeled away bark turning to flesh, eyes blooming like fungus. It stood 10 feet tall, its arms gnarled branches, its chest carved with faces. Not painted, carved. Each one wept. "I am the first," it said. Voice of the Watcher. "Step no deeper." Kaelen stepped forward. "We seek Halruth." "The guardian does not speak with men." "Then we will walk until he does." The creature tilted its head. "One of you is known." Its eyes turned to Rin. "You are Echo," it said. "You are Return." Before either man could speak, the creature raised an arm, and the earth cracked. Roots exploded upward like serpents. Kaelen drew his blade. Rin leapt between them and the creature. "No," Rin said. "We are not here to destroy." Kaelen hesitated. Then, slowly, lowered his sword. The guardian stared at them for what felt like an age. Then, it nodded once. Then follow the river that bleeds, it said. And do not drink. With that, it crumbled back into bark, vanishing. They followed the trail. A stream ran through the forest, its waters deep red, not blood, but sap, thick and shimmering. The trees along its banks bore scars, slashes in their bark that leaked slowly, eternally. As they walked, the forest began to show them more visions. Flickers of what had once been. They saw an ancient city swallowed by vines. Its people weeping as trees consumed their homes, not in violence, but in mercy. They saw a beast the size of mountains kneeling before a child, offering its own heart. They saw Kaelen not as he was, but aged and tired, sitting beneath a ruined archway, his hand in Rin's. And then, they saw the door. It stood at the base of a hill, between two massive roots. It was not made of stone or wood, but woven from branches, smoke, and silence. This is it, Rin whispered. Kaelen nodded. Halrith waits. They did not open the door. It opened for them. With a moan like the groan of earth itself, the branches parted. And they stepped through. Beyond was no forest. It was a hall. A cathedral of roots and starlight, where the air smelled of dreams. And at its center, seated on a throne of bone and bloom, was Halrith. Tall as a tower. Eyes like dying suns. Skin marked with galaxies. You have come, he said, voice like crumbling mountains. Kaelen stepped forward. We seek the truth. Halrith tilted his head. Then you must be unmade. The chamber was alive. Though no breeze stirred the air, the branches above swayed with a rhythm older than seasons. Petals the color of dusk drifted from unseen blossoms, vanishing before they touched the ground. Light came not from torches, nor stars, but from the very bark of the walls, pulsing gently, as though the forest itself were breathing. Halrith, the guardian of ages, did not rise. He merely looked into Kaelen, into Rin, past flesh and memory, into the very blueprint of who they were and who they might yet become. You seek truth, Halrith said, and even though his voice was quiet now, it rang like chimes in a canyon. But truth is not something you find. It is something you survive. Kaelen stepped forward. Then test us. Rin stood beside him. Together. Halrith extended one arm, a limb gnarled like petrified roots. From his palm grew two seeds, one deep violet, one pale silver. They hovered in the air before each man. Eat, the guardian said. And fall. Without hesitation, Kaelen took the violet seed and placed it on his tongue. Rin followed with the silver one. The seeds dissolved instantly, leaving behind a sudden weight in their chests, as though something had been unlocked within them. the world around them shattered. Kaelen awoke on a battlefield soaked in ash. He stood alone, his armor cracked, his sword broken. All around him, the ruins of Vareth burned. The towers he had once built were no more than molten stone. Bodies lay still: soldiers, citizens, friends. And on a distant hill, Kaelen saw himself older, crowned in rust, face twisted by rage. The vision Kaelen turned and saw him. "You are the seed," the vision hissed. "The promise of greatness. And look what you became." Kaelen drew a phantom blade from the earth, the only weapon that remained. "I do not fear who I might become," he said. The other Kaelen charged. They met like thunder and storm steel against wool. Every blow struck echoed with memory, his father's disappointment, his mother's silence, the cries of men who followed him to doomed wars. The final blow sent both versions of Kaelen crashing to their knees. The vision faded. Kaelen was alone again. But this time, he stood tall. Rin found himself beneath the canopy of a different world. He stood in the clearing where he had first met Zaran, but she was not there. The harp lay shattered on the ground. Around him, wolves circled, not familiar, not gentle, but snarling, savage. He reached out to calm them, but they backed away, as though they did not know him. He turned and saw the forest rotting. Trees wept black sap. The rivers ran dry. The birds fell from the sky in silence. And there, at the center of the decay, stood Rin, untouched, uncaring, eyes like stone. "You left us," the false Rin said. "You chose walls over roots. Language over howl. Fire over instinct. I chose growth," Rin replied. "You chose to forget," the other spat. "You let them make you human." Rin stepped forward. "No. I chose to become something more." The savage wolves charged. Rin did not run. He closed his eyes. And the wild within him awakened, not as beast, not as man, but both. When he opened his eyes, the wolves bowed. The other Rin was gone. And the forest began to bloom once more. Kaelen and Rin awoke gasping, the chamber of Halrith unchanged. Yet something inside them had shifted, reforged under pressure, not of stone, but of self. Halrith regarded them with unreadable eyes. "You have swallowed yourselves and returned. Few ever do." Kaelen stepped forward. "Then speak. Tell us why we were called." Halrith rose. The chamber groaned beneath his weight. Roots creaked. Light dimmed. "Because the world is dying," the guardian said. "Not in flame. Not in flood. But in forgetting." Kaelen narrowed his gaze. "Forgetting what?" "The first truths," Halrith replied. that kings are not born but chosen, that wild and city are not enemies but brothers, that death is not the end, but a return. He turned to Rin. You were made to remember. And to Kaelen. You were made to lead. The guardian extended both hands, and from his chest, a single branch broke away, split into two staves, each carved with glyphs no living tongue could name. With these, you will wake what sleeps beneath Narrated, he said. You will dig not into soil, but into soul. Rin reached for one. Kaelen took the other. As their fingers closed around the relics, the chamber began to collapse, not in destruction, but in release. Light poured from the walls, and vines twisted toward the ceiling, revealing a path upward. The forest has finished its part, Halruth said, his form beginning to dissolve. Now go. Before what waits in stone wakes on its own. Kaelen and Rin climbed through tunnels of light and root, past memories not their own, into a world that was not forest but not yet city. When they emerged, the sun was rising. Narrated stood in the distance. But the world had changed. And so had they. The journey to the forest of dusk had tested every fiber of Kaelen and Rin's strength through thorns that tore flesh, rivers that swallowed men whole, and nights haunted by shadows born of their own fears. But nothing prepared them for what awaited beyond the tangled veil of ancient boughs, Humbaba, the guardian of the old world, the last sentinel of a forgotten age. Humbaba was no mere beast. He was a living monument, a colossus of bark and bone, towering above the tallest trees, his breath the winds howl, his footsteps the earth's tremble. His face was carved with twisted roots and moss, eyes glowing faintly like embers beneath a dying fire. Legends whispered that his roar could bring down mountains, that his gaze could freeze a man's soul. As Kaelen and Rin approached the clearing where Humbaba dwelled, a heavy silence fell, a silence that swallowed sound, light, and hope. Rin gripped Kaelen's arm. This is the moment. Kaelen nodded, heart pounding. No turning back. They stepped into the clearing. The earth seemed to recoil beneath Humbaba's massive form. With a slow, deliberate motion, he turned toward them, his voice a grinding thunder. Who dares trespass? Kaelen raised his sword. We are the sons of Narrated, seeking passage and peace. Humbaba laughed, a sound like cracking ice. No peace for those who disturb the sacred. The battle began with a single step. Humbaba swung a limb that shattered trees as if they were brittle twigs. Kaelen barely leapt aside, feeling the force knock him into the dirt. Rin darted like a shadow between roots, aiming for the guardian's knees, his strikes sharp and swift but barely scratching the ancient bark. Kaelen roared, rallying his strength. Rin, to my left. Together, they struck in a dance of fury and desperation, steel clashing against bark, fire meeting earth. Humbaba's roar echoed through the forest, shaking leaves from the highest branches. 4 hours, they fought. Rin's agility kept him alive, but exhaustion crept in. Kaelen's sword grew heavier, his muscles screaming. Yet the guardian did not falter. Then, in a moment of clarity, Kaelen remembered the stories told by the priests how Humbava's power was bound to his mask, a relic woven from the shadows of the first night. If we can remove his mask. Kaelen whispered. Rin nodded, understanding. With renewed purpose, Kaelen feigned weakness, drawing Humbava's attention. The guardian lumbered forward, confident, but Rin circled wide, eyes searching. The mask was there nestled deep in the tangled bark, shimmering with dark energy. Rin leapt, fingers grasping the edges. Humbava screamed, a sound of pure agony. The forest trembled. With a final, desperate effort, Rin tore the mask free. Humbava staggered, his glowing eyes dimming. The great colossus fell to his knees, voice broken and pleading. Kaelen approached, blade at the ready. Mercy, Humbava gasped. Kaelen hesitated. In that moment, something ancient stirred within Kaelen's heart, a recognition of the cost of power, of the cycle of destruction and rebirth. Lowering his sword, he spoke. Your time as guardian ends. But your spirit will live in these woods, in balance with the world we seek to protect. Humbava's eyes softened. The forest sighed a breath of relief and sorrow. The guardian vanished into the earth, leaving behind a single seed glowing with ethereal light. Kaelen picked it up. This is our promise, he said. Rin smiled. They had won the battle, but the war for the soul of Vareth had only just begun. The triumph over Humbava had filled the city of Vareth with hope and whispered tales of legends reborn. Yet, beneath the banners and song, a darker shadow was spreading, one that neither Kaelen nor Rin could escape. It began with a slow, creeping sickness. Rin, once the wild spirit of the forest, now a brother in arms to Kaelen, felt a chill deep in his bones, a coldness not born of winter or battle wounds. His strength waned. The fire in his eyes flickered uncertainly. No amount of herbs, prayers, or rituals from the priests could stem the tide. Kaelen watched helplessly as the man who had become his closest companion faded day by day. The king, who had faced gods and monsters, found himself powerless before this unseen enemy. The city's healers were baffled. This is no common illness, one whispered in the shadowed halls of the temple. It is a curse sent from the heavens, a punishment for the hubris of men. Kaelen refused to believe it. But the signs were clear. Rin's fever burned hotter each night, racking his body with tremors. His breath came in ragged gasps. And with each passing hour, the vitality that had once made him untouchable waned. One evening, as twilight bled into the streets, Kaelen sat beside Rin's bed, holding his hand. Do not leave me, Kaelen begged, voice cracking for the first time in his life. We still have so much to do. Rin's eyes, dim but fierce, met his. I am part of the forest, he whispered. and the forest must return to the earth. Kaelen clenched his jaw, tears stinging. You are not alone. Rin smiled faintly. Never alone. The final days were a tempest of sorrow and defiance. Rin's mind wandered between worlds, the wild and the city, life and death. He spoke of visions, of rivers that turned to stars, of forests swallowed by silence, and of a place beyond the veil where Kaelen would someday follow. Kaelen stayed vigilant, a sentinel to his friend's fading light. He prayed to the gods, made offerings, and vowed revenge on those who dared strike his brother down. But fate had its own design. When Rin finally closed his eyes for the last time, the city mourned as if the sky itself had darkened. At his funeral, Kaelen stood atop the great wall of Barath, voice booming across the gathered masses. Rin was no mere man, he declared. He was the wild made flesh, the spirit of this land. His death is a wound to us all, but his legacy will not fade. Tears streaked down his face, unguarded, raw. The forest remembers. And so shall I. But even as the city wept, the gods whispered in the shadows. They were not done with Kaelen. Not yet. The loss of Rin carved a hollow in Kaelen's heart deeper than any battlefield wound. The city of Barath mourned, but the king's grief was a tempest, fierce and unrelenting. Where once his eyes shone with the fire of conquest, now they burned with a desperate hunger, the desire to defy death itself. Each night, Kaelen stood upon the highest terrace, gazing beyond the walls at the distant horizon, where legends whispered of a man who had conquered death, a man named Utharion, keeper of eternal life. It was said that Utharion dwelled beyond the endless sands, beyond the mountains where the sun rested, in a place forgotten by time. If anyone could grant Kaelen the power to escape mortality, it was Utharion. Kaelen summoned his most trusted counsel. I will seek Utharion, he declared. And I will bring back the secret of immortality. Barath will no longer fear death, and neither shall I. The council was torn between hope and despair. Many feared the journey was folly, a king's vain grasp at eternity. But none dared question the king's will. With a retinue of loyal guards and provisions for the unforgiving desert, Kaelen set forth. Rin's memory was their silent companion, a beacon driving them forward through blistering days and starless nights. The endless sands stretched before them, a vast ocean of shifting gold and scorching sun. Mirage and madness awaited the unwary, but Kaelen pressed on, guided by ancient maps and whispered prayers. Days turned to weeks. Many fell to the desert's wrath, heat stroke, thirst, and hallucinations. Yet Kaelen's resolve never wavered. His mind replayed Rin's final words, fueling his determination. At the edge of the desert, where the sands gave way to towering cliffs, Kaelen encountered the mysterious Sanu, a hermit known to commune with the spirits of the earth. Sanu spoke in riddles. The path you seek is not in the crossing of sands, but in the crossing of self. Kaelen's brow furrowed. What do you mean? To find life eternal, one must first embrace death not as an enemy, but as a teacher. The hermit handed Kaelen a talisman carved from the heart of a fallen star. This will guide you through the final trial. Pressing beyond the cliffs, Kaelen entered a valley shrouded in perpetual twilight. There, he found the gates to Utharian's realm, an ancient city of crystal and shadow, suspended between time and space. Within, Utharian awaited not a man, but a figure woven from light and memory. His eyes held the weight of millennia. "Why do you seek me, mortal king?" Utharian's voice echoed like 1,000 winds. "To conquer death," Kaelen replied. "To bring life eternal to my people. To stop the pain of loss." Utharian studied him, then smiled a sad, knowing smile. "Immortality is not a gift to be taken lightly. It demands a price few are willing to pay." Utharian's challenge was simple yet profound. Kaelen must endure 7 days and 7 nights of unbroken sleep, a sleep that would strip away fear, pain, and memory. If he survived, he would awaken reborn. Kaelen agreed without hesitation. As he lay down beneath a canopy of stars woven into the ceiling, his eyes closed, and darkness embraced him. The trial began. Dreams came in torrents, visions of Rin, of Barad, of battles fought and friends lost. Shadows whispered of forgotten promises and impending doom. Kaelen fought to hold onto himself, to resist the pull of oblivion. But as hours turned into days, his consciousness frayed. On the 7th dawn, Utharian's voice pierced the silence. "Awaken, king." Kaelen opened his eyes. But the world was unchanged. The pain of loss remained. Utharian shook his head. "You have failed." Kaelen's heart sank. Yet before despair claimed him, the hermit Sanu appeared. "True immortality," Sanu whispered, "is not in escaping death, but in living fully and leaving a legacy that outlasts the ages." Kaelen rose, understanding at last that his quest was not to cheat death but to transcend it through honor, memory, and courage. The journey back to Vareth was quiet, but Kaelen's spirit burned brighter than ever. He carried Rin's memory like a torch alight to guide his reign and inspire his people. Kaelen's journey back to Vareth was heavy with silence and thought. The desert had tested his body, but the trial within Utharian's realm had tested his very soul. He returned not as a king who had conquered death, but as a man humbled by it, aware that immortality was a legend, and true legacy was forged in the lives left behind. When the walls of Vareth finally came into view, the city looked both familiar and changed. The people had endured hardship in his absence. Rumors and fear had grown like wildfires. Some whispered that the king was lost to madness. Others feared a new threat lurking beyond the horizon. Kaelen stepped through the gates, greeted not by cheers, but by cautious eyes. The city awaited his judgment. Within the palace, the council had fractured. Some sought to seize power, others plotted alliances with distant realms, sensing weakness in the king's absence. Kaelen knew the peace he sought would not come easily. He called a gathering in the great hall, a chamber carved from the oldest stone, where kings and gods had once spoken in unison. My people, Kaelen began, voice steady but grave, I have returned from the edge of death and beyond. I sought to escape the fate that took my brother, but instead, I found the truth that binds us all. Murmurs filled the room. Kaelen raised his hand. Vareth will face trials yet. The world beyond these walls shifts and changes. We cannot cling to illusions of power or immortality. We must stand united, rooted in courage, wisdom, and memory. Outside, the city was stirring. The scars of Rin's passing still lingered: empty streets, silent markets, a grief that touched every heart. But Kaelen's return sparked something new: hope. He walked among his people, listening to their stories, their fears, and their dreams. He vowed to rebuild not just walls and towers, but trust. Yet, shadows moved in the corners. The gods, angered by mortal defiance, whispered of reckoning. The sea goddess Isera, furious at Kaelen's rejection of her gifts and her wrath unleashed through the beast known as the Celestial Bull, stirred storms in the east. Kaelen knew the peace he sought would soon be tested by forces both mortal and divine. But for now, he stood tall. A king reborn, carrying the weight of loss and the light of hope. The tale of Kaelen and Rin was far from over. The calm that Kaelen had fought so hard to restore in Vareth was shattered by a roar from the depths. An ancient fury awakened. Isera, the sea goddess scorned, had unleashed the celestial bull, a monstrous beast born from the darkest tides. Its hooves thundered like storms, its breath was a gale that toppled trees and capsized ships. The very oceans churned in terror. As the beast approached the shores of Vareth, the city's defenders rallied under Kaelen's command. But even the strongest walls and sharpest swords seemed fragile before such raw power. Rin, though still bearing the mark of his fading strength, stood resolute beside Kaelen. "This is our fight," Kaelen said, voice steady as lightning. "For our city, for our people." The battle was fierce and relentless. The celestial bull tore through ranks, its eyes burning with the rage of 1,000 storms. Kaelen's sword flashed like a comet, cutting arcs through the beast's thick hide, but the wounds healed almost as fast as they were made. Rin darted between the bull's massive legs, seeking a weakness, a chink in the armor of chaos. With a cry, he leapt onto the beast's back, gripping a tuft of coarse fur. Together, the two warriors wove a deadly dance, steel and wool against storm and fury. But Isera was not done. From the crashing waves, her voice echoed, a haunting melody that stirred the bull's rage and tightened the bonds of magic protecting it. Kaelen realized the key was not brute strength, but breaking the goddess's hold. "Rin!" he shouted. "Find the source of the magic." Guided by instinct, Rin plunged into the surf, searching beneath the turbulent waves. There, in a cavern of coral and shadow, he found a crystal pulsating with eerie light, the heart of Isera's power. Meanwhile, Kaelen held the celestial bull at bay, each strike buying Rin precious moments. With a mighty roar, Rin shattered the crystal. The beast staggered, its fury breaking like a wave upon the shore. Freed from the goddess's grip, the celestial bull let out a final, earth-shaking bellow before collapsing. Isara's voice faded into silence. The seas calmed, and Vareth breathed once more. Exhausted but victorious, Kaelen and Rin stood among the ruins, their bond forged stronger than ever. But the gods had only just begun their reckoning. The victory over the celestial bull was celebrated across Vareth, yet beneath the jubilant songs and flickering fires, a heavy shadow gathered. The gods' silent watchers of mortal pride were displeased. Their wrath would not be quelled by the fall of a beast alone. Kaelen and Rin had defied ancient powers, and the price for such defiance was steep. That night, as the city slept under a blanket of stars, Kaelen was visited in dreams by Isara herself. Her form shimmered like moonlight on restless waves, beautiful, terrifying, and unforgiving. "You have shattered my will," she whispered, voice like crashing surf. "But the gods' balance must be kept. For every defiance, a sacrifice." Kaelen awoke drenched in sweat, the goddess's words burning into his soul. Days later, a strange malaise spread through Vareth, not illness, but a malaise of the spirit. Crops withered overnight. Wells ran dry. The winds carried whispers of doom. Then, tragedy struck. Rin, whose bond with the wild had been a source of strength and hope, fell gravely ill. No healer or priest could stem the sickness that took hold of him, a darkness that no mortal blade could pierce. Kaelen was torn between fury and despair. He pleaded with the gods, offered sacrifices, and vowed to face any challenge for his brother's life. Yet, as Rin's breath grew shallow, the truth was clear: the gods demanded retribution. In the shadow of loss, Kaelen made a vow not just to save Rin, but to seek a way to bend fate itself. He would journey beyond the known world, face the eternal, and challenge death itself. For if the gods claimed his friend, they would find a king unbroken. The city mourned, but Kaelen's resolve burned brighter than ever. The tale of Kaelen and Rin was far from over. Kaelen stood on the precipice of fate, the weight of Rin's fading life pressing heavy on his soul. The city of Vareth lay behind him, its walls a fragile promise of safety, but his eyes were fixed forward toward the shadows beyond known lands, where myths whispered of the Eternal One, the keeper of life's secret. With only a handful of loyal companions, Kaelen ventured into the uncharted wilds, guided by ancient texts and cryptic prophecies. The path was perilous, littered with forgotten ruins and guarded by creatures born from nightmares. Days blurred into nights as they crossed desolate plains where silence was deafening, and rivers that seemed to flow backward in time. Kaelen's determination did not waver, every step was driven by the hope to reclaim his friend's life and defy the gods themselves. At the edge of a vast chasm, they found a gateway to the realm of Utharion, an ancient city suspended between worlds, shimmering with ethereal light and haunted by echoes of the past. Inside the crystalline halls, Kaelen confronted visions of his deepest fears: betrayal, loss, and the fleeting nature of power. Yet through these trials, his resolve hardened. Finally, before the eternal figure of Utharion, Kaelen laid bare his heart. "I seek not to escape death alone," he said, voice steady, "but to carry the light of life forward for Vareth, for Rin, and for all who believe in hope, Arthurian's gaze pierced through the veil of time. To grasp immortality, one must first surrender to mortality, he intoned. You will be tested beyond the limits of flesh and spirit. Survive, and the secret is yours. Kaelen accepted the challenge, ready to face the abyss. 7 days of unbroken sleep awaited dreams entwined with reality, a battle fought within the mind and soul. Visions of past and future collided, memories and oblivion wrestled. When Kaelen finally awoke, he found no magic had granted him eternal life. But something deeper had changed, a profound understanding that life's true immortality lay in legacy, in courage, and in the bonds forged with others. The journey back was quiet, but Kaelen returned not broken, but reborn, carrying the weight of loss with the strength of hope. The city of Vareth stood tall, but the air was thick with unease. Kaelen's return after the harrowing journey had stirred more than hope, it had ignited the simmering tensions beneath the surface. The council, once fractured, now conspired in the shadows. Whispers of dissent and power plays echoed through marble halls and dim corridors. Some saw Kaelen's absence as weakness, others feared the changes within him, changes that threatened the old order. Kaelen entered the great hall, where the weight of countless eyes pressed upon him. The air was cold, voices hushed but sharp. Among them stood Lord Theron, a man whose ambition was as vast as the city's walls. King Kaelen, Theron began, his tone dripping with thinly veiled challenge, your absence has cost us dearly. The city is vulnerable, and the gods grow impatient. Kaelen met his gaze steadily. I return not as one broken, but as one forged. Vareth stands because of its people, not because of fear or tyranny. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Theron's smile was cold. Words are wind, your majesty. Will you stand against those who seek to seize what you leave behind? Kaelen's hand rested on the hilt of his sword. I will protect Vareth and its legacy with my life. Outside the palace, shadows moved, spies, saboteurs, and traitors weaving their webs. Kaelen knew the battle for his kingdom's soul had only begun. But stronger than ever, with the memory of Rin and the lessons of his journey guiding him, Kaelen prepared to face the storm. The reckoning was at hand. The city of Vareth had long been a tapestry of shifting loyalties and whispered betrayals, but under Kaelen's steady hand, a new dawn began to emerge. With the council's dissent quelled and the shadows of rebellion driven back, Kaelen sought not only to restore order but to forge a future where strength came from unity. He called upon the people, not just nobles and warriors, but farmers, artisans, and scholars to join in rebuilding what had been fractured. Through festivals that filled the streets with laughter and shared labor that mended walls and bridges, the city's heart beat anew. Rin's memory became a symbol of wild spirit and steadfast loyalty, a reminder that true strength was born of bonds unbroken. Yet, as peace settled, distant horizons whispered of new challenges, of kingdoms stirring, of ancient powers awakening, and of destinies yet to be written. Kaelen stood atop Vareth's highest tower, gazing beyond the city walls. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, he faced it not alone. The sun rose over Vareth, casting golden light upon a city transformed. Where once there had been division and despair, now stood hope and renewal. Kaelen had not only survived trials of gods and men but had forged a legacy that would echo through generations. He gathered the council and the people in the grand plaza, where the air was alive with anticipation. There, he spoke not as a king demanding obedience, but as a leader inviting partnership. The strength of Barath lies not in walls or weapons, but in the hearts of its people, Kaelen declared. Together, we will build a future worthy of those who came before us and those who will follow. From distant lands came envoys bearing gifts and alliances. The story of Kaelen and Rin, the wild spirit who had become brother, the king who had faced death and returned, spread like wildfire, inspiring all who heard it. Kaelen knew that true immortality was not in defying death but in the stories told, in the lives touched, and in the hope passed down. Under his guidance, Barath flourished a beacon of courage, wisdom, and unity. And in the quiet moments, beneath starlit skies, Kaelen would look to the horizon, knowing that the journey never truly ends. The city of Barath stood as a testament to resilience and rebirth, its stone walls bathed in the golden light of dawn. The streets once scarred by strife now hummed with life, the laughter of children mingling with the rhythmic clang of hammers rebuilding what time and turmoil had broken. King Kaelen walked among his people not as a distant ruler, but as a guardian of their hopes and dreams. His face bore the lines of hardship and wisdom, his eyes reflecting a fire tempered by loss and love. Yet, beneath the surface of this renewed kingdom, a quieter story unfolded, a story of memories, legacies, and the eternal dance between light and shadow. In the cool embrace of twilight, Kaelen found himself atop the highest tower of Barath, gazing out beyond the city walls where the land met sky. The horizon stretched endlessly, a canvas painted with possibility and mystery. He thought of Rin, his brother not by blood but by choice and fate. The wild spirit who had walked the thin line between man and nature, whose sacrifice had shaped the path of kings. Kaelen's hand rested on the ancient staff bestowed by Halroth, its carved glyphs warm beneath his fingers. It was a symbol not just of power, but of responsibility. Of the delicate balance between mortal ambition and the timeless forces that govern the world. The seasons turned as they always did, but Barath thrived under Kaelen's reign. The city became a beacon, attracting scholars, artists, and dreamers from distant lands. The tales of the king and his wild brother spread like wildfire, songs sung by minstrels, stories etched in scrolls, legends whispered under starlit skies. Yet, Kaelen knew that stories were not static. They grew and evolved, shaped by those who told them and those who lived them. His journey had taught him that legacy was not a monument frozen in stone, but a living flame passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. One evening, as the moon cast silver shadows upon the palace gardens, Kaelen sat beside a quiet stream, the soft murmur of water a balm to his soul. He closed his eyes and let memories wash over him, the laughter of Rin, the trials of the forest, the whispered warnings of gods and ghosts. A gentle breeze stirred, carrying with it the scent of pine and distant rain. Kaelen smiled. For though the path had been fraught with peril and loss, it had led him here where hope was alive, and the future was theirs to shape. Beyond the city, in the wild places untouched by stone and steel, the forest whispered still. Roots tangled beneath the earth, carrying the stories of old, stories of guardians and kings, of wild spirits and mortal hearts. And in the depths of the forest, a single seed pulsed with life, a promise that from endings, new beginnings always sprang. Kaelen rose, eyes bright with determination. The journey was far from over. For as long as stories were told, as long as hearts dared to dream, the echoes beyond the horizon would call. And Kaelen would listen. Title: Kaelen and the Wild Brother, an epic tale of friendship, fate, and legacy. Description: Step into the ancient world of Narrated, a city of stone and spirit, where King Kaelen's restless heart leads him on a journey beyond mortal limits. Joined by Rin, a wild brother born of forest and shadow, they face gods, monsters, and the very edge of death itself. From battles with colossal guardians to defying divine wrath, this epic saga explores the power of friendship, the price of defiance, and the true meaning of immortality, not in endless life, but in the legacy we leave behind. Join us on this immersive storytelling adventure filled with fierce battles, mystical forests, divine trials, and timeless lessons that resonate beyond the ages.